your expertise that's assigning the value for all of these items within the building, and then the value of the land? I mean, I imagine those are pretty intensive appraisals.
It's a great question. So, as with everything, there's various levels of cost seg talent and services. Once you get to the cost seg, you will have people who will ask you to take photos, send you kind of that stuff, and they're going to do where like you're kind of doing the majority of the work, like the online calculator stuff, which again, for some 250,000 property stuff like that, maybe, you know, a firm doing it would be too expensive. No to everything. If there's like a little column of what do you guys do? Then you've got all the way down here, just we won't go through all of it because everyone knows there's various levels of expertise. Down here, we'll call it level 10. I like that. There's a lot of varying levels. Over here, yes. One of the biggest items that we're doing is going out there and trying to substantiate using comparative land values. We've had it before where that swings the needle $200,000, $300,000 for the final deduction. Because if this is my entire property and I have to take this much land out, my cost seg pie is only this. Then if I'm only getting 25% of that, and I'm taking that number times 0.8, I want this back. I want as much of that back as I can. So land value in New York can be above 50%. In certain places, land value can be extremely high. So yes, we have a whole legal team that gets with kind of trying to figure that out, mostly through going for multiple appraisals and that type of thing. If it doesn't work, we'll substantiate it ourselves. We always have a 30% cap. We've only gone above that maybe 15 times ever, and it is in like Manhattan. And there's no comparative ones that we can fight with. But if another note, if you're kind of on the pro tour with this stuff, if you see your CPA valuing your land above 30%, again, that's not going to happen till way down here, but that's a place for you guys to scrape back immediate money. That's like a one-day project for us. And sometimes we see on a 30A is a perfect example. On, you know, if you don't mind, on your house, we ended up getting about 75 on a $1.3 million house. We got about $75,000 back by moving land value because of competitive ones right next to it. And, you know, of course, we have to substantiate and build that whole little packet out. But if the IRS comes and asks for a request for documentation, Mark would just hand them our audit ready deliverable, which is another thing you'll get down here is like everything is, they call us type of situation.
So that's a good question to piggyback on that. So 38 properties typically have been sold fully furnished. I sell a lot of fully furnished stuff too. If a client does call say it's $1 million property, I'm guessing you guys are going to try to promote as much value to the furnishing, even though you can't use that for an appraisal, like when you go to sell the property, but you try to promote.
You mean that top tier Italian finished wood grain?
Yes.
Barstool?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Because you want to take as much of that million, right? You're going to assign it to the items.
Picking it into the couch for sure. I mean, we've got a very, very aggressive approach. We are, and we've got lawyers and CPAs. We work in tandem, both sides. I will be really honest. The CPA is always like, don't do that. And lawyers all like, I could defend this tonight. I'm ready to go. So there's a nice in between somewhere between our teams. And normally where it lands, eventually we have a really talented partner of the cost seg side. He has final signing on that. And I'm very comfortable with that. He has 12 years of PwC doing nothing but cost seg. After 6 months, he just moved into that and did that the whole time. And yes, we are very aggressive as a CPA. So when you hear me say I'm very aggressive, I'll also, you know, cower. And, you know, there's like a difference between a lawyer saying they're very aggressive and us saying we're very aggressive. But you can add a lot of value by getting in there and trying to assign as much worth. And what he's talking about for anyone who's not quite picking that up is if you have a fully furnished house, you might have this FF&E type of situation where you could put out of the million, you know, maybe 60K, right? But if we go through there and it looks really nice and we feel comfortable, check some labels. I mean, My team is really after it. I'll be honest, like we have absolutely flipped couches, taken a look, because there is designer stuff and we've got catalogs and we can look at what it's worth. You could get this up to maybe 68, 80. Sometimes we'll find some really nice stuff, make it 95 that we're comfortable with. And now immediately that's going straight into that short life. We don't have to take those ratios. We have to take it by the pointing. But I mean, it might take us 40 minutes extra on the site visit if it's fully furnished to get an extra 20K. Like high fives all around, because 20K at 37%.
Okay, thank you.
We just got like a 12K loop to the house, right? And we're very small business minded. 12,000 extra in our clients' pockets means they introduce us to their friends. And we can say, hey, we go above and beyond and we do all this type of stuff. That's what we're shooting for. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just an example, let's say you bought something 2 years ago and you're like, hey, I want to depreciate all of the real estate on this land. Is the depreciation value based off of what you purchased it at? I think you alluded to this before. It's based on what you purchased it at, not what market value is for that. Could you elaborate?
Yeah, for sure. So I know that we didn't really get into the accounting, and I just don't think with the fact that we only had 4 hands kind of go up, I'm trying to like touch it, but stay out of it. But again, what happens is you purchased an asset. So you've got this balance sheet, okay? So it's living on that balance sheet. So if you think about it kind of logically, it's already been placed as some dollar amount on there. So what's happening after that transaction, hopefully it's going up, we'll even go more aggressive with that arrow, is irrelevant. Because it's already living on your balance sheet as an asset, and actually the value of it is going down because we're depreciating it. So to answer that more simply, it is definitely always based on the acquisition price for where our starting line is. Then the next big thing we're looking at, our 2 big hurdles, we go acquisition price, land value. Now I've got my clay, on the table type of situation. Cool. Yeah, great question. All right.
I got one, and forgive me if I, this doesn't fit into all your stuff, but one of my models is I buy 20 to 50 space mobile home parks where the park owns all the homes, okay? We go in there, we turn all the homes, we remodel all the homes, sell them on contract, brings the value up. Usually we hold the park for 5 to 7 years. And then now we've recouped a lot of our funds back by then because, we're selling these homes. We bought a 50 space mobile home park in Memphis for $565,000. Came with 42 homes, okay? And we go in there, first the dogs and the guns, and these are nice parks.
Not in Memphis. No.
And I got both of them, nasty stuff, but how do you work it? I mean, we're doing underground plumbing, we're in that case, as a matter of fact, Memphis came in, they took out all the gas lines and ripped all of our water lines and electrical. We had to go in and fund it ourselves and put it in the water line. So now we're doing dirt down. Now we're taking this asset and we're remodeling it, and believe me, I had the worst CPA you've ever met. I mean, I don't know how.
Try me.
Yeah.
Horrible stuff. I mean, they couldn't write off their shit. And so, I mean, how does that work in a situation like that?
Great question. That's a whole, you've named like 5 or 7 things to
Yeah,
unpack.
we might go to lunch on that one, you know what I mean?
A weekend, yeah. So
Oh,
first of all, just going with the gas and the rest of that stuff, it's all going to depend on the contract and your legal standing for everything. Sometimes the work that people put in, they do not get to keep on their balance sheet because they don't own it. I have a feeling that's probably going to be your case. To be decided through a review. That would be a larger legal sided review of your contract.
Okay.
Another thing, are your mobile homes mobile?
But they take the axles off from underneath. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, I can tell you stories. I've been doing this for 30 years. A guy came in and stole a mobile home in the middle of the night.
Oh my God.
And no one in the.
Was somebody in it?
Okay, you know what I mean? It's like, how do you feel?
Okay.
Nobody saw it, you know?
There's a weird line.
Woke up trying to figure out why they're.
I'm glad he's here. Okay, there's a blurry line between 179D and cost seg. And what I'm hopefully you and I are at least gonna connect on this. If you remove these things, is it still mobile? The IRS would say, yes, I can very quickly put wheels back on it, back to 179D, you're getting capped, you know, at certain numbers, and you're gonna hold, that's a whole different tax code. Which we do. So we can look at the blurry line and make our decision, and sometimes actually 179D is gonna be better. So it's not necessarily that you wanna fight for one or the other, it's gonna depend on the asset, like everything, it depends on the circumstances. Now, what if you build a nice little retaining wall here with flowers? Imagine this is a nice little step up and this is the entrance, right? You start to actually build out around it, you know? There's a certain point that you've done enough decorating and landscaping that now that is no longer considered, you know, something that can roll away. So that's our second hurdle with your question. So under the earth, possibly. Is this in the earth? Maybe. So that's our second piece we have to get. Another thing that's really interesting is going to be getting into CapEx. So if you're going in and you're making these significant improvements, if we imagine, and these are all, guys, just to let you know, anything I throw out is just for educational purposes. It is very dependent on the house. But remember, in cost seg, we're getting about 25 through 20. And you got to know this can go up to about 45 for like refrigerated warehouses, right? So the range is bigger than you would think. But to keep it simple, we're around 25% of what we can get from a building. CapEx is much higher because most of the time, you replace some roof is a good example of a long-lived asset. But most of the time when you're coming in, you're making the interior nicer, or you're making the curb appeal nicer. Those are both buckets that are short-lived. Okay, so I've seen, you know, 80% CapEx go straight into our short-term bucket. So there's a chance a lot of people kind of poo-poo on getting these smaller properties, maybe 400, 500,000, or in your case, 50K a pop, and then putting whatever you put into it. From a tax perspective, some of those guys will do that one build. If you have a big portfolio, we start to consult around what you should buy this year to offset this year and next year. And kind of, we're already looking at least a year ahead. This is a really strong strategy. If you go, we had a killer year. And no, I'm not interested in doing due diligence, doing another giant, you know, office building or one of these big old, you know, multifamily properties. We have had people buy up a, you know, maybe $2 or $3 million, you know, trailer park, and then pump $2 or $3 million into it to make it really cute, tiny homes. I mean, we've seen some creative stuff that looks great when people finish, and they're taking sometimes around like 3.5 on like 3 million of the CapEx, and maybe 580 into it. Right at the end, they're getting like almost high 90s. So it's just going to depend again on the deal. And that's why one of the services you'll get from any cost seg firm is you send them your stuff and they'll do an estimate. Because until we've had a discussion, it would be insane to sign and just say, yeah, let's go ahead and move forward, because these numbers vary so much depending on the assets. Do you have any other like little hanging other statements in there that we didn't touch?
I mean, you know, in Washington State, for instance, the park I had up there, you have to build a roof over it for snow load. So now this thing's semi-permanent. In Oregon, with tornado, or wind, not tornado, but they have wind issues. So they all had to be anchored into the ground. Okay.
Here's a question for one of the pros here. If you've built something that's not attached to the structure, such as for snow, is it short-lived or is it long-lived?
Short, it's not on the structure.
So again, depending on your build out, a great example of that, we had a really cool hotel, and they had originally come with blueprints to have these awesome like canvas sail type design pieces. And they were going to bolt it into the building at one point. So Bobby, the head engineer guy, was kind of looking at it and he goes, I wonder how much it would cost to just put pillars in or somehow make it so that this is barely away, and if we could make it look really cool. You know, so that they don't, because unfortunately as an accountant, if we care about the money, but like, they're like, that won't look good, it's just off the table. So we're always kind of trying to think of the design element when we come to the table. And I went and asked them, it turns out to be some artist. You know, the rest, so instead of just the value of whatever it would have been for the material, it was designed by someone and all the rest of these things. Turned out to be like almost $1 million sale thing in front of this building. If you've ever seen DIA, it's like the same material, that canvas material. So anyway, it costs about $13,000 to build it away. So they got to take 13,000 plus the around $1 million for the actual piece. So again, that's where the consulting, if we come in earlier on development, can be very helpful. And stuff like that. So if it's away from the structure, and it doesn't need to be far, we had another a more down to earth one for this kind of conversation here. We had an awesome house in 30A that had this huge sprawling deck, like down to the oceanish, right? And it had like 2 or 3 terrace and like an awesome pool, just a great deck. Well, it came all the way up, slapped onto the house. It was about a $700,000 thing. And so you can put these spacer joints between that actually at a higher level build they will use for hurricane and movement. So double checked with some of the different tax law and stuff. We were able to consult. Again, we don't do any of the work, but we were able to put those in and then take that deck comfortably. So that was probably our biggest, you know, win for coming in after something's built. Normally it's built and someone doesn't want to tear something down, because then you also don't want to let the cost seg kind of tail wag the dog type of situation. We try to stay out of people's way because it is supposed to be a cash generating asset, right? Not just a deduction generating asset. So we want to be careful when we're consulting, because people do get really excited about boosting their cost seg number and boosting their cost seg number. And they're like, what can we do for this or that? And eventually,
That's interesting. A shorter life item like a deck would get assigned if it was just attached, would get assigned a long-term life.
the way that it was built, it would have absolutely, it had to be assigned as part of the structure, because it's a great question. Underneath, there was all these stilts and the house was kind of up. This big, like $5 million place and this huge deck. Well, like, you know, the last piece of structure was kind of there. So this piece here was loaded on this. So therefore it is in effect, engineering wise, it is absolutely part of the structure. So we had 2 options. We could have cut it. This was my non-engineering idea. Why don't we just cut it away, hire some guys, put another post here, Shazam, 10K, we'll be done. Bobby, who again, is a little bit more seasoned, he said, you know, believe it or not, I think they have room for these like Caleb joints or something. I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. That's why I pay him to be the guy to come in to fix those type of things. So, but we have had other clients where neither option worked, and we normally just won't tell them. It's just kind of a, you know, hey, it would have been nice if we could have taken the deck, but yeah, that's how that worked out. You guys kind of understand that? So if it's attached to it and you couldn't just cut the 2 away and then jump on it, then it was definitely part of the structure. In layman's terms.
Other questions? I know there's some out there, Mike.
For those that are looking at buying a property and wanting at least a ball, I know that it's easy to get free estimate for you guys or anybody, but to get a ballpark idea on how much land would be allocated in their purchase, how much reliance can they just place on the local county assessor? Like, land is 20% in the county assessor's website. I'm gonna use 20% on my purchase price for land. How much weight can you hold there?
It depends. And what is it going to depend on? Do we like the county's assessment? But to your question, can you rely on that? 100%. That is actually our authority, is the county. Absolutely. So anytime we go away from a county, even, and guys, we still have to use professional due diligence. I've had it before where there was this awesome piece of land and it was at least $1.5 million, and some assessor came in and threw, I think it was like, I'd have to look like 370 or something. And I went, oh, I wish I was a younger man. I would just go, wow, we could just use these numbers. But it's like, no, because we look around and every other piece of land per acre is sitting right around the same amount. Did we argue it down? I'm sure we did. I have to review it. But if we see something that's really an outlier, we're also not going to take it. But our true north or our needle is definitely the county. Yeah, nobody's coming back. The IRS is not coming back saying, where'd you get this? And I went, with the government and they go, those guys don't know anything about land. This is ridiculous. It stops there. That train stops there. Great question though. And most of our stuff does go back to the final source being some sort of established government agency. Yeah, go ahead.
Question, what happens when your land value actually changes? Like in the reassessment here in Nashville, we had land values jump from like $20,000 to $40,000 or whatever the number may be.
This is a cool thing about cost seg, which makes our job a lot easier with that specific question. Remember, we've got, let's just say this is a year, right? So this is year 0 when you purchased it. We've got a definitive date when that settlement statement comes through. Everything is tied back to this exact period, right? Which is really nice because we might be 4 years and the land was 300K and now it's up to like 470, right? We don't care about what it's worth. We don't care what the land is valued at or any of that stuff. We're going back and capturing this. That makes sense?
So you're not changing that until, no, you're not changing it ever.
Ever. So another cool thing about cost seg is once you have it done, you're locked in. So when we come in and do our work, when we finish, we hand you pretty much a depreciation schedule and we are gone. So you buy your next one. We don't do your bookkeeping. We're not there to step on any of your accountant's toes. We're simply there to consult on this one line item, which is really nice. And at that point, we can pretty much take off. So when we're gone, the next time that this is going to need anything to happen is going to be when, from an accounting standpoint, besides depreciation or CapEx. But in general, when are you going to have the big next thing for this property?
So,
That's exactly right. So we're pretty much gonzo until there's a taxable event of, a sale or something like that. And then I'm sure you guys are well familiar, but you got the 1031 that we normally see coming into our properties. That doesn't affect us at all. In fact, I highly recommend if you can do cost seg and 1031, they go perfectly hand in hand because you're deferring the taxes from this. Then you jump into this and you get another huge deduction. Same number, it's not affected. Another good thing while we're talking about what affects what, you guys are looking at like your classic balance sheet. Does it matter if the bank owns 80%? Am I losing 80% of my cost seg because it's not my asset? No. And that leverage is also another piece of cost seg that makes it like where it starts to get, where the numbers start to sound just on the commercial side, these numbers can start to be stupid. Where it's just like, I cannot believe I'm providing this type of a deduction from what they did. We had a